Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So, this, as I was telling Alice before we got started, the book of Exodus has always been one of my favorite ones to really study. I love the book of Exodus. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot going on in it. And Moses himself is just, he's a very human character,
Yes.
very human person in the Bible. He has his ups and his downs. His high moments are really high and his low moments are really low. And so he's one of those you can really identify with, I think, in my mind. So I've always found him interesting. So, of course, we have the Ten Commandments. So what's the first one?
Be good.
Well, that is important, but no, the first one is, of course, do not have any other gods before me. Then you have, do not make yourself an idol. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. Now, here's where it gets interesting in my mind. So the first four, do not make any other gods. Do not make yourself an idol. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. And remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Okay, those four all focus on God. So it's important to focus on God, and especially the first one really is vitally important because that connects everything else. If you don't have the first one, it doesn't matter. If you follow every other one, it doesn't matter. Then we have honor your father and your mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not covet. So the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all about how we treat others, right? Now, what's interesting is, to me, it seems like this really interesting transition from God to people, specifically when it talks about honoring your father and your mother. So we see God as our father. So it seems to me that this is the perfect transitional commandment, that it's, the first four is about God. And then the fifth one is about God and our humanness. And then the last 5 are about connecting to other people. And I just think it was written in a significant way, in an important way. I thought that was interesting. And of course,
yes,
this was kind of the framework of this new Israelite nation. That this was going to be part of their modern legal system and everything like that. And also, Jewish tradition says that all of the 613 laws found in the Torah are summarized in these 10. So what's interesting is we are considered a New Testament people. And yet many, many people still point to this. Now, not that these are bad in any way, shape, or form, but Christ turns them kind of on their head a little bit and says, honor your Father, your God, with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your body, and your neighbors likewise. That basically covers it, right? But yet people still want to look back to the 10 Commandments. They still want to reflect upon those, and they're more focused, it seems like, on maintaining the 10 Commandments than they are what Christ said, which is actually far more significant. It takes these 10 and takes them a step further.
Well, the first ones, the first 10 were the 10 Commandments, show where we have fallen short.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yes, very much.
This is where we're falling short. This shows our sin, maybe is a better way to put it.
Yeah.
This exposes our sin.
And it certainly does. And it gives a basic guideline saying, okay, this is what you need to cover. But again, we look at it as again, kind of, although we also have to recognize the significance of the Old Testament because it's where the basis for the modern faith the new covenant comes from. But Christ was like, don't just, follow these 10 commandments by the letter. Focus on the intent of it. That's even more important. So he talks about, don't commit adultery. Yeah, but that also means don't have any lustful thoughts. So what he was saying was, okay, you've got these. Now go further than that. Don't just stop here and say, well, I covered the basics. I'm good. We need to go even further. Now, what's interesting is if we look at it from a Jewish perspective, the 10 Commandments are different. And in fact, in the original Hebrew, this literally reads the 10 statements, not the 10 Commandments. And so the Jews actually count the first statement, which is, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, as the first commandment, which is really interesting. So they actually, they change some of it just a little bit in comparison to us. Now, granted, they read much more into the original Hebrew, the original language, and also to some extent they actually do more interpretation than we do as again, New Testament people, which I think is very interesting. Because if you actually speak to somebody of the Jewish faith, they'll say there's a lot more interpretation of the readings than there is taking it quite so literally. So which again is very interesting. So the second commandment, according to the Jewish tradition, is you shall have no other gods before me. And it doesn't simply refer to stone idols of Moses' day. It also means other gods or anything that we worship more than God. So money, power, love, whatever. The third commandment was thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. So it's often said was, you're not supposed to say OMG. A lot of people say that, but the Hebrew translation literally reads, thou shalt not carry the Lord's name in vain, meaning don't commit evil in God's name, which I thought was,
I don't understand that.
So in other words, don't say the Lord told me to do this.
Okay.
That type of thing. Say that you've been ordained by God to do something that's an evil act that is evil. Of course, that gets into the whole, well, I don't know whether that's evil or not, and that's part of the interpretation thing. But I think it comes down to what would God say, really?
And these were written on the stone tablets.
On the stone tablets themselves, yes.
Twice, right?
Right, because Moses came down from Mount Sinai, saw the people worshiping the golden idol that they had built, that Aaron had built after melting down the jewelry. Aaron, who was supposed to be the second best guy around, did this. Moses came down from the mountain. And again, this is one of the reasons I so really like Moses. This is such a human reaction. He takes the stone tablets and just smashes them. It's kind of one of those, fine type thing. And I really get that. I totally get that response. So yeah. So then Moses has to go back up the mountain, explain to God what he did, and get the stone tablets made again. Yeah, and then come back down. And of course,
he has to take his own tablets this time.
Right. Yeah, he has to take his own tablets. God's like, you know what? I'll do it again, but this time you got to bring your own. First time's a freebie, but yeah.
And why do you suppose? Why suppose that?
I have an idea, but what do you guys think?
I don't.
Any thoughts, Alice?
You mean why he had to bring his own stone?
Yeah.
To make him work for it, maybe.
See, that's what I'm thinking is because whether or not he may have felt justified in his anger, it doesn't change the fact that he smashed the tablets.
Mhm.
And I think this was almost his reparations for what he did wrong. It's like his atonement. You have to bring your own tablets this time. That's kind of the way I looked at it. It was a way of God saying, now you have to bring your own tablets. You understand why I'm making you do that, right? You get that what you did was wrong. They were wrong. I'm not, getting him to understand that two wrongs don't make a right.
Right. Okay.
That idea that, yeah, I totally get why you're mad, but that doesn't change the fact that you broke the tablets that I gave you.
Mhm.
And so that, for me, that's what that always was about. And again, I would read these, again, Book of Exodus has always been fascinating to me. And so I looked at it from almost like a kid's point of view. A kid being corrected by his parents.
Right.
That, okay, we'll do this again, but you got to work a little more because you made a mistake. You need to pay back a little bit. Recognize there's got to be an atonement for what you did wrong.
Sounds like my mom when I slammed the door.
Yeah.
Right.
Same thing.
You went back
Yeah.
and you closed it again.
You have to come back and close it right.
Right.
Yep, exactly. See, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Is there had to be some sort of understanding,
Mhm.
and what's also interesting is the third commandment. Again, according to Hebrew tradition, is the only commandment which, when violated, God never forgives, which is doing evil in God's name. Again, that's Hebrew tradition. I'm not saying that that's, but we also have to remember that within the Jewish tradition, the traditional Jewish tradition, they have to follow the laws. They are not given do-overs, more or less, like we are. We ask for forgiveness, we're given it again. Within the Jewish faith, it's about following the laws. So those 613 laws, they're supposed to follow every single one of them. Now, there was a great book I read a number of years ago. I actually have a copy of it. It's called Living a Year Biblically. And this gentleman actually gathered together all 613 laws and tried to start living his life according to those laws. And he found that, of course, it's not possible. It's impossible to do so. And so he actually went and talked to priests and rabbis specifically and said, okay, how can I do this? And they're like, no, you can't. It's not possible to do that. So he would only do certain parts at a time because, he was trying his best to kind of follow through with this book. And it's a very interesting book, but it was trying to follow all of these. And of course, there's a very funny chapter where, of course, that when a woman is on her monthly cycle, that a man is not supposed to sit on any furniture that she has sat on. And he made his wife mad, and she sat on everything, so he couldn't sit anywhere. But it was just these little bits and pieces, and it was really an interesting book because it looks at, honestly, we have it really, really easy compared to those of the Jewish faith.
Oh yeah.
We don't have all of these different restrictions on us to the extent that they do. They have very strict laws, whereas we have more or less saying, copy Jesus, be the best possible human being you can, and honor God when you do that. That's what it boils down to. And if you make a mistake, honestly, ask for forgiveness and correct it. That's really what it boils down to, comparatively. So, there's a lot that we can say about the whole Jewish faith and Jewish tradition, which I think is a beautiful language. It's a beautiful faith base when you're looking for tradition. I mean, the traditions are absolutely beautiful within the Jewish faith. I greatly admire them. Again, when we're looking at things like the Passover meal, I mean, there's such a precision and such a beauty within the ritual of the Passover, the Seder meal, that I think it's really interesting. So anyways, kind of, we've deviated a little bit here, but going back, so what's something else, so going into the fourth commandment, which is remember the Sabbath day, and it has a tendency to, even though it's talking about God and being in connection with God, part of it, to an extent, though, really goes into humanity, because it's saying, remember the Sabbath day, which means rest and honor God. And it's actually really important, because without rest, we can't honor God, because we're going to be moving so fast, we don't get a chance to connect with God. And so, even though it's under the four that I say God focused, I think there's definitely a significant element about resting. Now, of course, the tradition has, within the Jewish tradition, the Sabbath day is Saturday, whereas as Christians, our Sabbath day is traditionally Sunday. But with the way the modern world is going, I don't think we can anymore justify saying Sunday is our day of rest, because for some people it isn't. Some people work on Sunday because they have to, right. And I'm not going to tell somebody, well, you're going to hell or whatever because you're not resting on Sunday. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Dad and I don't rest on Sunday. That's a day of work for us. For some people, they'll say that's our only day of work. But that idea, we don't rest on that day. That is, maybe, depending on the week, it may be the day we work the most, or maybe under the most consistent or scrutiny even. But to say that Sunday has to be your day of rest, I don't think is right. Saying that we should have a day of rest, I think is important.
Right.
I think everybody should have a day of rest, not only for themselves, but also for their spiritual life, their spiritual faith, and how if people don't have a downtime, it doesn't work for you physically, mentally, or spiritually, emotionally. All of those elements, it's so necessary for us to all have a day of rest.
Now, why do you suppose some of the 10 commandments, God went into a little more explanation than some others? In other words, remember the Sabbath, keep it holy. That one, for example.
Right.
He went on into quite a bit more detail. And the one, you shall not steal, that's just it. Those few words, those 4 words. Why do you suppose he made?
Well, okay, I have my thoughts, but what do you guys think? Any thoughts on that from anybody?
I mean, it's, you shall not steal, for example. That seems self-explanatory, but God could have said more about that one, but he chose not to.
Well, so I think part of the reason is, especially when we're looking at keeping the Sabbath holy and kind of going into more of that, we have to remember that they were basically starting more or less a new faith from this point on, a new approach to faith. So they needed some explanation. They needed some understanding. They had prayed to God, they worshiped God, but we have to remember that it was during this time period that we started having the tabernacle, or the place of worship and the place of God's presence. So this was completely new to them. So they needed some more explanation. Things like don't steal, well, duh, don't steal. What more do you need for that? But for something like keeping the Sabbath, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? What is the Sabbath? Maybe they didn't even know what a Sabbath really was, because we have to remember that they were slaves. So did they really get much of a downtime? Who knows? So,
But verse 17, for example,
yeah,
you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. And then he goes into more explanation. And I don't know,
yeah. There's some that they give a little bit more, and I think part of it was God being smart about it and saying, okay, this is the one that they might stumble on, or this is the one they're going to look for loopholes on.
Okay.
So I'm going to hedge my bets. And I'm going to make sure that they know, okay, there's no wiggle room here. You shall not cover your neighbor's house. Okay, but he's got a really nice horse that I want.
Yeah.
And God's saying, you can't do that either. You're not supposed to want anything the neighbor has. And so I think that's kind of my impression. God knew how human beings were. And so he wanted to make sure that there were clearly defined parameters. This is the box, people. This is where you can work. That's it. If you're going outside of that, nope. I'm going to slap you on the wrist. Well, of course, back in the Old Testament, it was more about smiting than it was anything else. But I think it was the whole purpose was focused around making sure that as human beings, we know clearly defined what our restrictions are. And that's what I took it to mean is, again, God just knew human beings, and he knew where they're going to try to work things out. And of course, it has, what's interesting is one of the ones that, of course, he goes into was so the three that he really went into probably the most information was no images, no graven images, keeping the Sabbath holy, and coveting. And so all of these seem to be around focusing on self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's God recognizing that people have egos.
Right.
They are self-centered. And so for me, again, it looks like God knew people, and he knew people are inherently self-centered. And so these are the three I'm going to focus on and give. Again, I'm going to give a box. This is where you can work. That's it. And so that is my impression of why there were some that he gave more focus on. And again, I think it's just God knowing people and knowing that people are literally self-centered. They're just all about them.
And is there another commandment he didn't cover? Or not a commandment, another area of do not that he didn't cover. I suppose you could wind it down, could narrow it down, but I don't know. He covered a vast territory in just 10 small commandments.
He really did. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything, and like I said, that Jewish tradition says 613 laws are condensed into these 10, basically. So if 613 laws can be basically condensed into 10 very simple little rules, basically, I think he covered it. I can't think of anything else. And of course, the 613 rules, some of those are so weird and obscure, too, that if those can still be found under the 10, he had to have covered it all. I don't think there's anything, because even things nowadays that we think should be covered, I think are covered under the 10. They're obviously covered under the 2 that Jesus says.
Right.
So if again, those 10 could then be condensed into 2, that means 613 laws basically were boiled down to 2.
All right.
If we
Right.
really look at it. So I think God covered it all.
Uh-huh.
Again, he knew people. He knew how he created, and he didn't have any flaws in what he made, because the biggest he wanted free will. He wanted people to have the option of free will. And that was where it again comes down to. He could have made sure that he made a people that didn't even need the 10 commandments, but that would have then negated the very idea of free will. We wouldn't have had the free will then.
Yeah.
So again, the next one, of course, is honor your father and your mother. That one's pretty simple. Now, of course, some are more focused on being loved rather than necessarily being quote unquote honored, but it's showing a level of respect is what it's about. And again, by showing respect to our parents, and it's an extension of respect to God himself, who is our Father in heaven, although God has been referenced as both male and female throughout Scripture. So we can easily see that connection as well. Then actually, jumping ahead to even the 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. Of course, the biggest piece of this is how important this is to the societal focus of being truthful and honest to all of those. I'm going through some notes, but we'll go back and touch on some things if you guys want. But I'm just going through some notes that I found from again, kind of a Jewish perspective and maybe a more worldly perspective. And of course, goodness, compassion, love, all of those things are very important within a community. But truthfulness is vitally important in a social form, a legal form. All great societies, or all great societies, all great societal issues have stemmed from lies, lack of truth. Look at communism, Nazism, slavery. All of these are based on lies. So, for example, slavery, basically a lie that these people are not people, they're property. The same with, basically Nazism, saying that anything other than the Aryan race is doesn't really count. Communism was focusing not on the individual, but rather on the larger focus, which the larger focus is important, but we can't lose sight of the individual as well. And so all of these different things are based on lies, and so that shows the significance of truthfulness and not sharing the lies. So, and of course, the 10 Commandments are not really a list of rules. I've said rules, but they're not really rules, and they're more kind of directions. And so, God comes out and says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So he wasn't trying to put them under another form of bondage. He was saying, under the grand scope of things, this shows freedom from bondage. This as a societal whole, but also the importance of the individual. If we all agree that this is kind of I don't want to say the rules, but maybe the boundaries, although I don't like that word either, the boundaries of a society, of a new society carried forward, we're all going to follow these. So this will allow us further freedom that you've never had truly and honestly before. Because we have to remember, these people had been in slavery for years and years. I mean, generations had passed where they were under this slavery. So for them, they they honestly needed some rules because these were a people of slavery. They didn't know anything else other than being
How
told
to
what to do.
act. Yeah.
And so it's like with teenagers, they may say, "Well, I don't want any rules," but they do. They really do, because part of rules is showing a care for somebody's life,
Mhm.
and saying, this is what I want from you. The only reason I want this from you is that it can be used for you.
Mhm.
And by us all agreeing to these, we as a people can move forward in a stronger bond, not only with our God, but with each other. And as
Mhm.
we do this, our society will grow stronger and will grow bigger as a community and basically a nation, because they were establishing a new nation at that point then too, or that this was part of the basis behind it. Of course, they were going to be traveling for a little while
40
before
years.
this.
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So what is, and this may be jumping ahead, but what is, okay, do not.
oh, you turned away from us. Sorry, what'd you say?
Oh, okay, that's okay. It says thou shalt not kill. So it stops there, which is fine.
Right.
But what is the penalty? Did the Pharisees decide what the penalty was?
And see, that's some of the things that we get into then, the 613 rules. So I think what was happening was God saying, okay, these are the things that you need to abide by. But then I'm going to give to the final tribe, the tribe
The
that is
Levites?
the Levites. I'm going to give you the authority, more or less. You are my priests now. You're going to help. It almost seems like they were deputies, I
The
guess.
enforcers?
Yeah, the enforcers almost. And I think that they were given the authority to meter out uh, punishments. I think though we also have to think that as a people, this would have been, even though they were used to being dictated on what they can and can't do, they were used to laws and rules and things like that. I think because of this, I wonder how much leniency God had. Kind of, obviously there's some that you're going to be in big trouble for.
Right.
There's not going to be wiggle room. For example, murder. You can't just say, well, just don't do it again. There would have to be some restriction on that. But I think things like, don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't be like, oh, I or the house or anything like that. I think it would have almost been like the Levites were saying, okay, guys, remember, we're not supposed to do that. I know this is new for you. I have that feeling that maybe they were, but I almost think that they were the enforcers. Think that they would have been the ones. And of course, if we look at the 613 laws, and then we look at the Mosaic restrictions and rules, and the Levitical restrictions, we'll see that all of those have either judgment written down as a focus for them, or it would have been carried out by the Levites.
Right.
So if you carry forward, especially when we look into Leviticus, which is of course the book of the law, basically, that's where all of this stuff is really broken down. But again, you can break it down into each one of those goes under one of the 10. But very often you look and we can see things like don't wear mixed fiber, don't do this, don't do that. If you do this, it's under penalty of death. So there were restrictions and things that are written down for each one of the rules, and we can kind of get an impression. Now, did they potentially carry some of them too far? Potentially. But we don't know where they got that insight from. Were they praying to God and saying, God, give us direction? What penalty do we give for this? Or were they turning to Moses or later on Joshua and saying, what are our restrictions? What kind of punishment do we meter down for these faults
Yeah.
we have? But if you really want to look through Leviticus, there's a lot of the punishments and everything that are broken down right there.
Right. Well, and then in chapter 21, it says there are other laws you must obey, basically.
Right. But
And so,
and it does, but it also seems like all of those can still be broken down under the 10. If you read through them, yes, there is other laws, but I think it was more about helping them understand. So as we already said, that there were some that God actually kind of explained out a little further. And I think that's what these other laws that we see in verse 21 were, in chapter 21, is it was a further breaking down of it to, again, give a even more precise barrier or parameters around what they can and cannot do. So that's what it seemed to me for 21, is that there's a more, okay, it says this, we can look back at this, but because you probably needed more instruction, more understanding of it, here you go, type of thing. And again, that's we can look at Leviticus as well, because it gives an even more precise. I mean, it talks about foods and all of these different things, which some may say, well, this is really hard to figure out why or which one of the 10 commandments these are under. But we can still find where, if we look at the historical context of them, we can understand further why this one would be under this particular commandment and this one isn't, and this, and those type of things. Because I think to really truly understand, especially the Old Testament, we need to understand the culture in which it was happening. We can't carry forward all of those elements into the modern world because they don't make sense. It's not possible to truly comprehend it from a modern mind from so long ago when this was all originally written. It makes no sense. It's not possible. But it's also, the Bible is not necessarily written as a full history. It's more of a teaching element, a truthful and honest teaching element, but it's not written as a complete historical piece. It's like when we have a book, we don't include the history of the alphabet or anything like that, because as part of the story, it's not necessary. But to fully comprehend it, you may need to understand the alphabet and things like that. But that's a context that we already have as English-speaking people. We don't need a further explanation of it. So it's kind of understanding those aspects of it, that there's really more to it. So to truly be a proper student of the Bible, you have to be a proper student of history as well, and language. Because if to truly get some of the language, we need to understand the original context, the original language. Although I've said it before, although it's educated, basically what we have is guesses on what these words would have been. Most of them, there's no question. It's an accurate, rewritten, I don't know how you want to say, the translation is proper. But there are some that there's a little bit of wiggle room. There's a little bit, because again, they're kind of guessing on some of the words. Within the context, it probably makes sense, but there's some that they definitely took liberties with. It was, to some extent, it would have been a political aspect of why they wrote it the way they did, why they translated it the way they did. Because the further and further we get from the original documents, the more clouded it can also get.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
to say that we took it from the original Hebrew and then we translated it into Latin, and then we went to Old English and then we went to English, there is a lot of room for screw ups.
Yeah.
Honestly, I will never say that the Bible is flawed. I will say that the translation of it could be flawed. I will definitely say that, because that factors in human error, which we know humans are fallible. They just are. From the very beginning, we have been, we had two people and they screwed up. So we know that human beings screw up. And of course, it only took 4 people for there to be the first murder.
Right.
Before we had printing presses, there was the chance that the scribes, or whatever you want to call them,
Absolutely.
didn't write, didn't use the right word, and so that got changed.
Absolutely.
And it could be a whole different meaning than what we know today.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, is it today? I think that is the anniversary of William Tyndale's death. I think.
Or is it?
Yeah. So William Tyndale was, of course, put to death for translating the Bible into English. And so, yeah, it's again the part of it is, well, I think really was it about he was translating into English, and part of it, what they said was, well, we want to make sure it's the accurate translation. Was it more about them controlling it and having the authority over the people? Yeah, I think so. I really think that's what it was, because they don't want to lose the power. They don't want to lose the authority. They were the educated, so therefore the educated could be in charge. And they didn't want the common man to be able to read, God forbid, that anybody be able to read the Bible at their own leisure. That idea. So, but yeah, so to say that the 10 Commandments, I think I like the Jewish traditional term of the statements. They're 10 statements rather than 10 commandments. I like that better because it's too close to saying these are 10 rules. And because, yeah, they're basically saying you shouldn't do this, but it's more about making sure that we have a good connection to each other and a good connection to God. It's not meant to be telling you all of what you can't do. It's about defining what we need to have a fuller life. And I think that's again, people have a tendency to look at Christianity even and seeing all the things that we can't do, rather than looking at it as this gives us a clearer focus on what we can do to have a perfect life, or a better life than what we already have. And by not necessarily focusing on what the world says, it's much easier to have a stress-free life too. So I think there's a lot of things at play there on it. But if people are looking for restrictions, they're going to see it. It's like if you're
for sure
for something negative, you're going to find it. And people, of course, are very good at that.
Yes. Well, the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
There's different translations of them, but basically they're the same thing. I mean, it's. But with those 10, could you say? Well, I guess it goes back to that book you were referring to. Could you say, let me take these 10 commandments and see if I can one day not break them.
Okay, so here's the thing. Are we saying the original 10 Commandments, or are we saying how Jesus said to look at them? Because there's
Now,
a
what do you-
difference. We have to remember there's a significant difference. So Jesus, the original 10 Commandments were like, don't commit murder. Well, shoot, I can go a long time without doing that one.
Yeah.
But Jesus
But
said,
if you break one, you break them all.
right. But Jesus said, we need to look at it is if you are spewing hatred, that is the same as murder. So
Mhm.
if we're looking at the original 10 Commandments, can we go a day? I think so. If we truly look at them how Jesus said, I think it would be very tough.
Yes.
I think to actually look at him the way Jesus said would be near impossible. That would be tough, and you would have to be very focused on those, and so focused on them you wouldn't even recognize the day going by. I don't think.
Right. You would be. Well, I'd just stay in bed all day.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But then again, would you potentially break a rule by not getting out of bed and doing something?
Right. Right.
So,
You think about it. Yeah.
Right.
I can't imagine what that would have been like to try and do that. That's
Right. Well, again, that's why
Um,
I'm looking at things like, again, I point to the 613 rules. Can you imagine living your life
no.
and having, I can't even remember, let's be honest, none of us can actually remember all 10 of the 10 commandments, much less 613 rules, right?
Yeah.
So to look at it from that context, that would be even tougher because it was all about, you got to, now some would be easy. So some of the 613 rules included how you're supposed to wear your hair, and you're supposed to have tassels on the corner of your clothing, and
Right.
not wear
Right.
mixed fiber. Okay, some of that stuff is really easy. Don't eat shellfish. Don't eat, those types of things, and do this and don't do that. Some of them would have been really easy. Like especially for me, because I can't even eat shellfish because I'm allergic.
Right.
That was easy. I don't have a problem doing that. I cannot break that rule forever. But to look at it from that context, yeah, I think it would be very, very, very difficult. Yep, I think so. Yep.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it'd be tough. It'd be tough.
Very difficult. Yeah. So.
Well, I think the hardest one to keep is don't covet, because
Right.
you see something that you really want,
Right.
and that's coveting.
Right.
Now, whether
Yeah.
you on it or not, that's a different story. But
Well, I think it's even going so far as to say the coveting would have been even more to the point of not necessarily wanting it, but almost lusting after
yeah,
it and being willing to do anything potentially for it. It
Yeah.
wasn't just, boy, that's a nice car. It was, how could I kill that person and get that car without getting in trouble? Taking it to the real extreme. But yeah, I think that I agree. I think that would be the toughest one. It really would be, because it's
What-
hard not to just walk down the street and just be like, wow, I would really like that, type of thing, because we like
Does that one? Yeah. Does that one? The covet, and does that go along with "shall have no other gods before me"?
I think so. I think they're
Yeah.
definitely companion commandments.
Yeah.
I think so.
So,
But
in
it's
this
going
day
so
and age when
far.
money is,
What's that, Alice?
especially in this day and age when money seems to be
Exactly.
everybody's want,
Yeah.
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
you
Yes.
covet somebody else's money, and how can I get it away from them?
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I think you're absolutely right. That is definitely the most modern day one to
Mhm.
look at, for
Mhm.
sure. That
Especially scammers.
oh yeah,
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
I have a tendency to try to keep them on the phone as long as I can, though.
Oh,
Uh,
I don't even answer it.
I like to mess with them. Well, because
Well, I've done that too. Yes,
but
I've
see,
had them actually hang up on me.
oh, I have too. I have too. That is,
Oh, Alice, you really set up for a
Oh,
scam.
that's
I
always
can
my
swim
goal.
along. Yes.
Yeah, that's my goal. If I can get them to hang up, that's where I
Yes.
feel like I've won. I had one that said they're calling from the Visa MasterCard
Oh,
services.
yeah.
And I said, all right, so I'll make you a deal. If you can tell me which I have, I'll keep talking to you. Do I have a Visa or a MasterCard? And boy, he was trying. He was
Yeah.
trying to get me to say anything. And which I don't actually have either one, but I wanted to give him,
You
I
were
wanted to
really
give him
mad.
that. And of course, he got it wrong because I didn't have either one. And oh, yeah, he was upset. I said, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said, I just got to be able to trust you, and I can't trust you. And so, yeah. But see,
Mine would.
I have to answer the phone because it not only, as a pastor, I need to answer it. It also is where the Radnor phone directs, the Radnor Church's phone directs
Oh,
directly
yeah.
to my cell phone. So I have to answer the phone. I can't, just because I don't recognize the number, I still have to answer it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's one of those things, and I can appreciate people wanting to have the life that we have in the United States. I can appreciate that and I can recognize that, but that's not the way to go about it.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
so, yep. So, all right. Well,
Okay.
anybody else have anything? All right. Well, next week we will be studying when Matthias replaced Judas, and so
Uh-huh.
that little bit of study in the book of Acts, which is kind of an interesting little story that I think we kind of glance over. We really don't read much about it. So it'll be kind of a fun little one. So I'll pray and I'll see you guys. Well, Dad, I'll see you Friday night. Alice, I'll see you.
Yes. Yeah.
Sunday, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. What is are you gonna to bring into next Wednesday night? Are you gonna bring in the rolling of the dice?
Might talk about it.
At least that's my interpretation of it. The I can't pronounce those two words.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah. I know what you're
Pyramid.
talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what it is, Alice?
Yeah. Uh-huh. I
Yeah,
can't.
it's
I can't pronounce it either without looking at it.
Yeah.
Uman and Thuman.
Right.
Because
Like
I'm
that.
really intrigued with that.
Well, and of course, if we look at it though, too, it's very similar to what happened to Jonah. Well, don't you remember? They basically drew lots and
Oh,
to determine who
yes,
was at fault.
yes.
Which, of course, that was a very, very common tradition in multiple different religions because
Uh-huh.
the gods dictated who drew the short straw, more or less.
Yeah,
So
right.
rolling the dice, I mean, was basically the same thing. So yeah, it's seen at
Interesting.
least a few times in scripture a very similar situation. Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
well, let me pray and we'll get on out of here. Lord God,
Yes.
thank you so much for allowing us to come together to study your word, to just have fellowship together, to again dive into your word, have some fun, and just expand our knowledge of you and
Yeah.
how you would have our lives to be. We pray, Lord God, that we continue to grow. We grow both within your word, within our knowledge, and within our connection to you. We say all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Okay.
I'll see
See
y'all.
you, Alice.
Yep, bye.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.